Hello, my name is Katie Groves, and this is part 2 in my series about preventing reaccessing from destructive cult groups who use trauma-based mind control programming. If you have not done so already, I ask that you please watch the first 2 parts of my deprogramming series, linked in the description below, for disclaimers and safety measures you can take while watching these videos. In this video, I'm going to talk about some types of programs that were used to redirect me from my reprogramming process into pain, dissociation, and then ultimately contact with members of the group. Some of the basic types of programs that I faced in this context were denial programming, callback and reporting programming, self-harm and suicide programming, fog and scrambling programming, torture and flooding programming, and rapid switching and splitting programming. All of these things were used to keep me in states of, like I said, dissociation and pain, and then redirect me towards making contact with members of the group. These are all programs that were triggered specifically when I began to remember trauma, especially when I began to systematically work with my systems and gain cognizance of my dissociation and my trauma history. These are not things that my programmers, cult handlers, wanted me to remember, be conscious of. And so they installed programs in me from an extremely young age to redirect my thinking and behavior anytime I began to touch on the reality of what was really going on. So in this video, I'm going to briefly outline a little bit about each type of the programs I mentioned, and then in subsequent videos I will talk in more depth about each one, the mechanics of how they operated in me, and how I have learned to deprogram them, and therefore prevent reaccessing from the cult. The first one I mentioned was denial programming. This programming was used to redirect my thoughts into denial statements, often in the form of shame or verbal abuse from dissociative parts, and told me that what had happened to me hadn't really happened, that my trauma wasn't real, that I had false memory syndrome, that I was a compulsive liar, schizophrenic, or delusional, anything to make me believe that I had made this all up. The denial programming was also used to prevent me from accessing the knowledge of who was in the cult and who wasn't, of who could be trusted and who could not be trusted. And that was linked in with scrambling programs designed to rapidly redirect me back and forth between conflicting statements about who was safe and who was unsafe, so that I wouldn't be able to ground myself in any sense of reality about who I should avoid and who I should keep in my life. The next type of programming I mentioned was callback and reporting programming. These are programs designed to get me to go back to the cult, either physically or by making contact verbally through phone or online communications. The next type of programming I mentioned was self-harm and suicide programs. This is very simple to at least define. These are programs designed to get me to hurt myself or to commit suicide. And these are linked in with the flooding and torture programs. So I would often experience first a torture program, something that would cause me extreme internal physical pain through reliving actual physical torture that I'd experienced previously. And then, of course, the flooding that would flood me with these feelings and feelings of overwhelm. So I'd get flooded with traumatic memories, flooded with shame, thoughts that were very disturbing or painful for me. And then I would be redirected into a self-harm or suicide program, which would then use those terrible feelings to encourage me to hurt myself, to ease the pain, or to actually kill myself. And I want to pause and say the suicide programming can be, in my experience, as growing up with mind-controlled slaves, not just being one myself, but being surrounded by them, one of the most dangerous types of programming that people experience. And that is, of course, for obvious reasons. But I want to emphasize this because I have personally known people in MKUltra who tried to free themselves and who were redirected into suicide programming and committed suicide instead. I'm here today because I have worked extremely hard to not follow that programming. And it's not that other people who don't make it didn't try incredibly hard, but for whatever reason, the programming was stronger than their will to live. It tricked them somehow, or they felt too hopeless already, and they followed it and committed suicide. The next program that I mentioned was fog programming and scrambling programming. Fog programming is programming that fogs my mind, floods me with a sense of cloudedness, literally clouds my thinking and causes me to forget what I was doing, to get distracted from my deprogramming work, and dissociate me from whatever it was I had made contact with that was so threatening to my programming. So whatever memories I had accessed, thoughts or feelings that would then cause me to wake up, I would instead be fogged over inside and lose touch with it. The scrambling program is similar. It can often be used with the fog programming. The scrambling is used to scramble my thoughts and feelings so that I can't ground or track what I'm thinking or saying. It can be used to both flood me with rapid thoughts that don't make sense, agitate me, and subsequently dissociate me. Or it can be used to actually express itself in my speech. So let's say I'm talking to a therapist or someone on a hotline trying to get help, and I'm trying to talk about what happened to me, explain that I was programmed or very traumatized, and all of a sudden I'll start rapidly interrupting myself, redirecting into saying things that don't really make sense, and undermine my attempts to communicate. And this can have disastrous consequences for me when interacting with mental health professionals who don't recognize it as a mind control program and instead think I have some kind of psychosis. And that, of course, can lead to myriad problems. The last type of program I mentioned was the rapid switching and splitting, which can be induced by any of the flooding or the scrambling programs or the torture programs, and which cause me to switch very quickly between dissociative states or to split apart very fast. And the splitting programming for me has been one of the worst that I've had to face and one of the most debilitating during my deprogramming process, because I was split to an extreme degree and have an extreme propensity for splitting, which I have described in videos I just posted about exponential fragmentation. So all of this stuff, though, has been very painful and difficult to deal with and has set me back in many ways during my deprogramming process and led me to make contact with the cult at different times. But I have been able to find many strategies for dismantling these programs, avoiding triggering them during my deprogramming process while I undo deeper programs. And I've learned many ways of coping with the aftermath of these programs activating. Many ways of coping with all of this. So that's all I have for this video. I hope this all made sense. I'm a little scrambled right now myself. So I'm going to stop and take some time to ground myself, get in touch with the present moment, and try and have some fun today. Thanks.